Committee members, and I'm going to be introducing one of our other colleagues on the committee who will be introducing the speakers. African libraries have rich but underutilized collections due to a lack of access for many reasons and circumstances. Digitization of these collections will enrich scholarship across disciplines. Our panelists will discuss a major initiative that is underway to provide digital access to African archival collections. Stephen Rhind-Tutt will now introduce our speakers.
Thanks so much, Glenda. First of all, thanks tech team. This is all working, right? Excellent. And if you have questions, if you can put them on Pathable, that would be most appreciated, because that way we can actually moderate more easily. So today we have three panelists, and I'm just super excited to tell you a little bit about them. Let's remember also that they're calling from Lesotho and South Africa. So what we've done here is we've actually got, we're going to play a little video, which presumably will work perfectly. And then at the end, we'll actually have a Q&A session. So we have three speakers. The first speaker is Dr. Buhle Mbambo-Thata. She's a very distinguished librarian. If you're familiar with African librarianship, she is a very big name. She's currently university librarian at the National University of Lesotho. She's also a chair of the CLEAR board, if you're familiar with CLEAR, and has won many awards and distinctions, including the IFLA Medal for Distinguished Service to Libraries in Africa. Dr. Buhle is going to talk about the general condition and issues around Africa and African archives. Blessing Mawire has been working with Coherent to do research in African libraries and African archives for the past 6 months. Blessing comes to us from an Integra professional services. She has consulted with a number of incredibly influential organizations, including the UN, Elsevier Foundation, the Wikipedia Foundation, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She's got more than 15 years experience on the ground in African libraries across a large range of countries. So she's going to tell us about what our surveys found and some of the issues and problems. And then finally, Coherent Digital, pardon me, Christian Dupont, who's been a wonderful strategic advisor to Coherent Digital. He's currently the Special Collections Librarian at Boston College. He's going to talk about some of the solutions we've come up to the challenges that the other speakers have presented. So without further ado, I am going to press the play button, and it's all going to work swimmingly, I'm sure.
Good afternoon. It is lovely to be joining you at this conference from Southern Africa. This presentation will be given by myself and two other colleagues, Blessing Mawire and Christian Dupont. And we will be speaking about digitizing, preserving, and providing access to Africa's rich, yet endangered cultural heritage. And this is a report from the field. This is the context of our presentation. Africa is a continent with 54 countries. And because it's 54 countries, that means it's 54 jurisdictions, and the varieties of not only politics, but access to knowledge, technology, socioeconomic, political differences. So we are speaking about 54 different countries, 54 different jurisdictions, and 54 different experiences. The continent has a population that is 17.2% of the world's population. 16.72% of that population is less than 50 years old. And so Africa's population is really very young. And in a sense, it's what we would call millennials. And millennials, as you know, live online, at least in many countries. And for Africa's youthful population to take its rightful place in the digital economy, African knowledge, ancient and current, needs to be available and accessible in digital spaces. But there is a challenge, and this is the nature of the challenge. And I'll focus on 3 points. The first one being that there is challenge to accessing Africa's content in digital spaces. Research has shown that Africa's digital content only occupies 4% of the world's digital knowledge. Meanwhile, as you saw in the previous slide, Africa's population is 17.2% of the world's population. And so that seems incongruent. Secondly, if we look at this map, it only shows 2 African archives. But from what I know about the field, there's a lot more archives, which means that those archives that are not on this map are largely inaccessible, unknown, and need to be exposed so that they can be reflected to the world. And this map would change perhaps by the end of this project when we've added and exposed a lot more archives in Africa for archival collections. The second challenge is that there's a dire need to preserve African knowledge. Fires, floods, pests, and mold destroy records, destroy knowledge. And recently, at the University of Jos in Nigeria, at Mzuzu University in Malawi, at University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, and University of Cape Town, recent fires burned out collections that are irreplaceable. Those collections were in print, those collections were audios, and they were destroyed by fire. Sadly, though, that those fires were put out by fire brigades who used water. And so what fires did not burn, the water-based extinguishers destroyed. Furthermore, climate change is inducing floods in many parts of the world. And there's a real danger that Africa's knowledge will be consumed, will be destroyed by floods due to climate change. Thirdly, wars are common in many parts of Africa. And we have an example where in Timbuktu, the manuscripts, the ancient manuscripts that have gone to demonstrate how education goes back to many centuries ago in Africa. Many of the manuscripts, they were destroyed by a war. And those that survived were kept by vigilant people or had been digitized. And several of them had been digitized. Third challenge is that there's a dire need to disseminate African knowledge, because not only is it essential that that 4% grows, but also it is critical to put African knowledge in public spaces, in digital spaces, in order that we disarm any neo-colonialism and decolonize knowledge so that we demystify or we eradicate the myth that Africa has no knowledge by disseminating and exposing what is available in African libraries and African institutions. Africa's current and past knowledge is lost if it sits in hidden archives. Africa needs to have its knowledge available and accessible in digital spaces so that its youthful population can engage with African knowledge, so that when the millennials, African millennials are online, they are not reading other knowledge that is not African, but they have equally access to African knowledge as well as knowledge from other spaces. It is also important in order that as we pursue the social justice agenda, that African knowledge, African ways of knowledge, African politics is available so that Africa can be an equal player in the world. and also to promote research and development. Indeed, as we do global research and development, if African knowledge is not there, there is a dearth, there is an error, there is a gap. But there are stumbling blocks to digitization. And the first one is that, or the challenge of the first one is the socio-economic conditions. Digitization equipment is expensive because it is largely imported. Digitization skills are limited, and also there are often many competing priorities that take precedence to digitization. So when there is a competition between buying resources or buying some critical lab equipment, buying digitization equipment and training people often plays second fiddle. So a combination of these challenges makes essential and desirable digitization endeavors unaffordable. It just becomes impossible if there are no skills and there is no equipment. A third challenge is that previous digitization efforts had several limitations in that institutions from elsewhere came in with digitizing equipment, digitized and took away digital rights, and they've created a resistance on the field, and those collections that were digitized have become inaccessible in Africa or elsewhere. And so in the Africa Commons approach, we come with a different approach to engagement on digitization. The Africa Commons project is really a call to digitization. Based on that, it is crucial that the collections of Africa are digitized in order to increase the percentage of Africa's knowledge in digital spaces, in order for Africa to be an equal player in the digital economy, and in order to preserve the collections from natural disasters. The justification of the Africa Commons project is essentially that it's hard at the moment to find African cultural materials. Available finding aids are fugitive and often undigitized. Older finding aids are hard to find. Many websites can't be searched or easily found. And some archives and institutions don't even have websites. Even if they digitize the collection, they have no websites in which to disseminate the digitized collection. Fundamentally, most materials are not digitized, and this puts them at risk to loss, to fire, through fire, floods, molds, and other disasters. And so as part of the Africa Commons, I'm happy to introduce my colleagues, Blessing Mawire, who will discuss the results of a survey that was done to establish the scale of the challenge in Africa, as well as present a digitization strategy, and Chris Dupont, who will present a technical solution that is being developed to achieve low-cost, high-volume digital capture that ensures preservation and access to African knowledge. So may I hand you over then to Blessing to please discuss the survey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Buhle, for setting that background and understanding of the context of Africa, the history, as well as some of the current challenges that we have. I have been working with Africa Commons for the last couple of months as a lead researcher, and really to find out what is the current state of digitization in Southern and Eastern Africa. My presentation really is to look at the results and set the baseline for which Africa Commons will continue its work. Africa Commons is an online platform that seeks to help organizations to digitize, to disseminate, discover, and provide African cultural materials. In order for us to set the baseline, there was a need to establish a review and a needs analysis. And in order to do this, we sent out a survey, and the target, like I said, indicated was Southern and Eastern Africa. A desk review was also done to triangulate the results of the survey, and formal meetings and engagements have been done with different stakeholders. We had a unique reach out to 176 unique institutions, and the survey itself took about 10 to 15 minutes to complete. There were 3 rounds of reminders sent for the survey to the 176 institutions. And this was followed up by emails and phone calls. And the survey needed one to provide more of institutional details than personal details. We had an 11% response rate, which according to online survey results, it was quite a good result, considering, like I said earlier, that the survey itself needed one to complete it on behalf of an institution. These responses came from 9 countries, from Ghana, from Uganda, Lesotho, Ethiopia, Botswana, Eswatini, which is the former Swaziland, Zimbabwe, Liberia, and Namibia. When asked if the institutions had a digitization strategy, it was very good to note that a majority of the institutions indicated that they have a digitization strategy in place. However, having a digitization strategy does not mean that it is being implemented. So there was a need to probe further and find out in what ways these institutions and these countries require help to digitize the African collections. One of the most common responses was around insufficient funds to digitize the collections and to buy equipment for the digitization. Another need was around skills and capacity building for using the equipment as well as using the software associated and providing the post-production work and access to the collections. There was also need to understand what type of software is used to digitization and what are the options and what would best suit institutions. And the need to understand technical considerations of the digitization process. There were also needs around copyright issues. A number of African institutions and African countries affected by old copyright laws that do not include digital collections. As a result, it's very confusing for a number of African institutions as to how they digitize and then provide access to their collections. So there is need to understand each country's copyright law and how, in the context of the institutions, they can then digitize and provide access to those collections, making sure that they're aligned to their own copyright law in their country. Here in South Africa, the copyright law currently being used is from 1978 and does not include anything digital. And there's a current amendment bill that has been in Parliament for a number of years. So there is a lot happening, but it's taking its time. So there's a need to make sure that institutions understand their copyright laws and how, for now, they can digitize and make the collections accessible to their clients. There is also a need for understanding library management software and how it links to the digitized collections. The institutions were also asked in which subject areas their collections fall under. An array of subject areas, from presidential papers on African nations, engineering, history, medical, to management, geography, literature, sociology, mining. An array of subject areas was mentioned from where the collections are based. This is an additional set of subject areas, so it gets very specific. For example, Nguni states. So depending on the type of institution, whether it was an archive, a museum, a library, and what type of library it was, all these subject areas have been captured. On a very positive note, all the institutions were asked if they're still interested in, if they'll be interested to continue with African Commons and making sure that their collections are digitized through the Africa Commons project. And all of the institutions said that they are interested in digitizing their collections and working and engaging further with Africa Commons. Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Christian, who's going to take us through the rounding conclusion of where Africa Commons is going and what Coherent Digital's plans are for making sure that there is equity and access to Africa's collections. Over to you, Christian.
I have been greatly energized by the opportunity to meet and begin working with Dr. Buhle, Blessing, and other colleagues in Africa over the past few months through our respective engagements with Coherent Digital. I have been engaged with Coherent in my role as strategic advisor since its inception in late 2019. Our vision for taming wild content stems from a shared recognition that much of the valuable information that is needed for teaching and research is beyond the reach of traditional library approaches to acquiring and managing content. In my primary role as the chief curator and administrator of an archives and special collections library at a nationally ranked university in the United States, I'm keenly aware of the limits of our collecting, even in our areas of distinction and expertise, to which we devote the greatest share of our resources. We are not able to purchase or accept donations of all the relevant content we are offered, nor can we process and catalog quickly enough all of the materials we do acquire. The annual deficits in cataloging we run are sometimes smaller and sometimes greater, but we always seem to be adding to the debt of processing we owe those donors, those investors who have entrusted their collections to our care. And since our professional practices demand that we digitize only those materials that have been fully processed and cataloged, only a small fraction of our collections are available for access and use in digital form. Traditional library digitization requires expensive equipment and staff with specialized skills. Equipment is often large and not easily moved. Materials for scanning must be brought to the scanning station or digitization lab rather than the scanner to the materials. Digitization equipment has become very sophisticated and can produce extremely high quality images. Capture speeds have increased along with resolution and file sizes, enabling scanning technicians to digitize books and manuscripts at a fairly high rate of speed. And yet it's still not enough. Very few collections get this first-class treatment, while the rest wait idly for their turn to be scanned, which may never come. This is the situation in large, well-funded academic libraries and archives. Yet what about those institutions that do not enjoy the benefit of such resources? Their collections may also be, surely are, of great value for research, teaching, and learning, yet they have even less hope of being digitized by traditional means. What if we could turn the situation around, or even on its head? What if we were to digitize materials on the spot using portable scanners and even mobile phones, even before cataloging them? What if these scans could be uploaded to a common platform and made available to the world in seconds? What if we let text recognition software and other machine learning technologies take a first crack at creating metadata for indexing and discovery? Isn't this what happens when we snap and post a photo to social media? Why not take the same approach to building digital libraries, especially in places that do not have an abundance of well-funded institutions with high-end digitization equipment and specialized staff? In places like Africa, places that are rich and diverse in culture and mobile enabled. As Blessing's survey of libraries and archives in Southern Africa showed, digitization efforts are being undertaken by some institutions, but they face obstacles when it comes to obtaining equipment and training, software, and file servers. We believe that a simpler, less resource-intensive approach to capturing images, to enriching them with searchable metadata, and making them available through a centralized cloud-based platform with a more effective means, will be a more effective means of capacity building. We believe it will help African libraries and archives to more quickly address and mitigate the threats of catastrophic fires and environmental disasters, such as those cited by Dr. Buhle, which are likely to become even more frequent and more severe as Earth's climate continues to change. Basic capture it while you can digitization is as much a heritage preservation strategy as a research enabling strategy. If desired, items of interest can be scanned again using better equipment, but they cannot be scanned at all if they have been destroyed. Good enough may be the best, most practical way to achieve the common good. In North Africa, Coherent Digital expects to serve as the chief technology partner for a project organized by the Antiquities Coalition to document and digitally preserve early Arabic manuscripts in central Algeria in collaboration with the National Center for Manuscripts in Odrar. Founded in 2014, the Antiquities Coalition is a non-governmental organization headquartered in Washington, D.C., is working to stop the looting and trafficking of antiquities. Documenting cultural artifacts is an essential component of its mission and strategy. Coalition partners in Egypt have been training and engaging volunteers in the use of mobile phones to systematically capture geotagged images of vulnerable objects. Coherent will help to extend those capabilities and develop workflows to enrich object metadata through a combination of automated tools and human expertise and apply them to manuscripts. The nexus of this activity is the Coherent Commons platform, a cloud-based harvesting, indexing, and discovery service. Images of books, manuscripts, and other documents can be directly uploaded by authorized users from mobile devices, or ingested from file servers, or even harvested directly from websites. Each object is immediately assigned a unique, persistent identifier that serves as the spine through which all subsequent processing events are linked and preserved, creating an ever-accumulating object history. Enrichment of an object's metadata occurs over time as more users interact with it. Coherent cataloging is iterative and progressive rather than one-time and static. Coherent cataloging and metadata enrichment of an object can be distributed geographically as well as refined over time. Experts around the world can contribute and share their knowledge, and digital representations of the object itself, of course, with others. Coherent has pioneered the deployment of this novel information architecture in Policy Commons, our flagship product, launched a year ago at the 2020 Charleston Conference. With over 20 million pages of policy reports from more than 21,000 think tanks, NGOs, and IGOs, Policy Commons is the largest database and index of its kind, a one-stop community platform for objective, fact-based research from the world's leading policy experts. The Policy Commons directory currently includes nearly 700 organizations based in 33 African nations, with more than 20,000 reports from Africa and 200,000 reports pertaining to Africa. And those numbers continue to grow daily. Although it has been introduced only in the last year, the Coherent Commons platform has already garnered 2 major awards. The Award for Innovation in Publishing, presented by the Association of Learned and Professional Society Publishers, ALPS, and this year's Charleston Conference Best Interface Award. Building on these early successes, Coherent Digital is preparing to launch Africa Commons in early 2022. Thus far, we have built a landmark directory of archives, libraries, museums, galleries, and other cultural heritage organizations within Africa, as well as organizations outside of Africa with significant African holdings. The directory currently includes more than 400 entities with searchable snapshots of their websites. We have also identified over 250 primary source collections and hundreds of thousands of cultural artifacts. Africa Commons will make it easier to discover, locate, and cite relevant sources for teaching, learning, and research. And of course, we are focused above all else on enabling libraries and archives in Africa to upload and share their unique content with the world at large. Africa Commons will be based on a combination of free and for-fee services to ensure financial sustainability. All tools and content will be made freely available to African institutions. Institutions outside Africa will be offered subscriptions based on institutional size. Revenues will directly support Africa Commons and provide royalties to African institutions that license content. They will also retain control of their content. Responsibilities for clearing and respecting copyrights will be shared. Coherent is also actively pursuing sponsorships and partnerships for digitization in order to make as much African library and archives content as possible freely available. The Council for Library and Information Resources, CLEAR, an independent nonprofit organization with more than 180 member institutions, is seeking grant funding to support a version of its highly successful Digitizing Hidden Special Collections Archives initiative in Africa. As CLEAR's board chair, Dr. Buhle is guiding that effort. Coherent will be positioned as a primary technology partner. Coherent has also established a partnership in Africa with Sabanet, the Southern African Bibliographic Information Network. In April, Sabanet and Coherent Digital signed an agreement to build and distribute electronic library databases focused on Africa. Founded in 1983 as a collaboration of Southern African universities and libraries, Sabanet offers the largest database of Pan-African journals, the most complete collection of South African legal, union, and government information, as well as unique African library resources and reference, news, and archives. Coherent is the exclusive distributor of Sabanet products in North America, while Sabanet markets Policy Commons and other Coherent products in Africa. The main benefit of the partnership is the advantage it brings to building trusted relationships with institutions across Southern and Eastern Africa, the regions where Blessing has focused her survey efforts, and where she and Dr. Buhle have been facilitating virtual information sharing sessions with numerous institutions, including the National Library of South Africa, the Thabo Mbeki Presidential Library, the University of South Africa, Botswana International University of Science and Technology, Africa University, and the National Free Library of Zimbabwe. Conversations continue and project plans are taking shape. We're grateful for this opportunity to share our vision and excitement. We invite you now to engage in conversation with us. We welcome your questions and perspectives. Thank you.
No time's a factor. So first question that we've pre-prepared was, there have been many historical initiatives to digitize in Africa. And I'd like to ask Dr. Dr. Buhle and Blessing if they could talk to how these particular previous experience have done and what challenges we had and how we can avoid making the same mistakes.
There were mistakes in the past, and I will talk to some of the political ones and Blessing could talk to the technical ones. And the first one is that because there was such a great need on the ground, implementing institutions tended to be grateful for the opportunity to digitize, that they did not read the small print and they gave away a lot. And so when the project was done, things looked a lot more different. So because the need to digitize was urgent and huge, we saw a solution but didn't read the small print. And so the project was externally defined, not by the digitizing organization. And that created the challenges, particularly the technical challenges that then followed. Blessing?
Yes, good evening from South Africa. Thank you for joining us in Charleston and all globally online. I do concur with Dr. Buhle about that mistake. Another mistake that I can think of was the mistake of having assumptions about the African collections without fully understanding the issues of copyright, for example, that I spoke about earlier, and how they affect digitization within the different contexts of the countries. In particular, there have been efforts by different organizations to try and come and digitize. But then without that understanding, it has made it very hard to then make them accessible and available online for the rest of the world. Another mistake that I can also think about is really thinking about the long term. So there have been a lot of helicopter projects that come in for a short while, but that are not sustainable. So this really leaves the African institutions almost hanging, because after they leave, then there is no skills transfer, there is no equipment left for them to continue the digitization efforts and so forth. So the issue of sustainability and ensuring that it's a continuous process, and especially the issue of skills transfer to make sure that the African librarians or any experts working in the institutions really take this on board and make a run with it for the remaining years that they're working in the institutions. So really the issue of sustainability and copyright with some of the areas that we're trying to make sure that they do not recur. Thank you, Stephen.
Christian, would you like perhaps to answer the question on cataloging metadata?
Sure. The idea of being crowdsourced. So maybe I can respond to both questions there. One about the question about archives and sensitive information. So the model here is simply to provide the Coherent's role, providing some technology and workflow to help through whatever means, whether it's a mobile device or maybe a local scanner at the archives library in Africa, to then put it on a common platform. That's the technology piece. Who makes the decisions? Well, it's the library and the archives. So that's why we're talking with the directors of those institutions to see what it is that they want to have digitized. So they will control what gets digitized. So it's not that we're going in And it's not crowdsourced in the sense that there may be volunteers that will be engaged by the archives in addition to their staff. I mean, any model, we want to scale this up as much as possible by making it easy to digitize things, okay? But again, it's the institution that controls what gets digitized. And then the idea too that our platform, and I mentioned this presentation, but materials can be uploaded before they are and instantly available to those who are on the platform, being the library and archives, but they don't necessarily have to be shared publicly. So that's where there's that chance for some review, cataloging, metadata enhancement before it is actually then shared out. We do have experience with a Policy Commons platform, which has some 2.7 million policy documents that have been uploaded, and a lot of that is some automated metadata generation that can be very good and effective at doing that. And again, there's a review process with Policy Commons. There can be a different one with Africa Commons. So I hope that begins to speak to some of the questions there or concerns there. I'll stop.
The question is, what do legacy publishers, parenthesis, former colonizers in particular, owe this effort, owe to this effort?
Yes, thank you. Thank you a lot. And coming from a small country in Southern Africa, Lesotho, and this repeats itself right across Africa, a lot of African content artifacts sit elsewhere, and they've probably been digitized. If this project is to succeed, they owe digital repatriation to this project of the African artifacts they have in their collections that they have digitized, in order that those may become reunited, as it were, with the collections in situ or in the countries from which they came. So they owe a digital repatriation of the African collections that they have.
Yes, I agree with Dr. Buhle, Stephen. And just to note, in my other work, I'm also working to support the establishment of the Thabo Mbeki Presidential Library. And I do want to upload some publishers especially from the Northern Hemisphere, who have already taken the initiative to start engaging and wanting to repatriate, whether hard copies or digital copies. And this is something that we really encourage, because we do want that collaboration and understanding to make sure that those collections are also made available. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. I would actually also like to explain, in our research, we've identified over 500 collections of primary sources. I'm sure many of these collections come from your own institution. Our goal here will be to build an index, a discovery service that actually allows people in Africa more easily to find these resources. Very, very often we find excellent African resources buried deep, but they're not presented in a way that they're easily accessible by students, scholars, and researchers in Africa. So that will be another aspect of it. I'm afraid we're at time here. If anybody has, since we weren't able to get the tech working, I think we could squeeze in one more question. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I'll take the question about archives and sensitive information. Our architecture is predicated, much like social networks are, on the easy ability to upload content. But that doesn't mean that anybody can post content. You have to be registered. And we actually have the ability, if somebody is a bad actor, not just to remove the piece of material they've just uploaded, but to prevent them from any material they've uploaded, we can actually take down immediately. So the idea here is not to bypass issues of copyright or culturally sensitive information. It's to make sure that we can first and foremost get the content out quickly and at low cost, and subsequently make sure that it keeps quality. When we talk to scholars, they say, first and foremost, give us the content. Secondly, give us cataloging. So we're doing it in that order. Well, I'd like to finish then by thanking my African colleagues here for staying up late into the night. to be part of this presentation. Thank you for attending. On the Coherent website, you can find out more information about this, and this session will in fact be broadcast, of course, from the Charleston websites. Thank you, Glenda. And we hope to be able to tell you more one-on-one. Thank you so much.